It was all smiles at Carrington today as two players who have been out for so long return to training as we do prepare for that quarter-final clash against Liverpool in the FA Cup. Mason Mount and Aaron Wan-Bissaka are back. Those are the two biggest updates concerning Manchester United today. My name is Webb, and here is all Man United news, but I'll dwell more on the return of these two important players. Of course, people can say, how important are they? After all, Mason Mount was never playing football before he got the injuries that pushed him out. Let me tell you this. Mason Mount is an important player for Erik ten Hag, and we might be, of course, slow to see what exactly Erik ten Hag sees in him, but suddenly you don't spend that money on a player in a summer transfer window. Is your first signing when you don't consider them or rate them so highly among the lot. So Erik ten Hag certainly has got a plan and is hoping that his return is to full fitness because players return and go. But he's hoping that he is that player who will, I think, work his ass off and get himself back up because he believes he's a typical Manchester United player. The thing about Mason Mount is he's a hard worker. If you look at his playing style, he's not lazy. He runs, and those are the players that Erik ten Hag wants. Players who will grind now, and people will ask you, where is he going to play? That's the question. And I'll tell you honestly, looking at the current setup of Man United with Casemiro, Kobe Maino, and the Bruno Fernandes, the captain, you may not see where he will play. Garnacho on the right because at times he can play as a winger. But in his own admission, Mason Mount says his best position is a number 8. Now we all know for a fact that it's difficult for Mount to be considered ahead of anyone in that midfield. But what he does for me is he brings a bit of competition to another option to the manager in terms of the number 8 position and the number 10. I think he brings us a different dimension because of his work rate. He performs better with freedom because he's a more agile player. The only thing I've had with him, the few games he has played for United, is when he's free so much, when he's really let loose, he's all over the place, working hard and running, but to no effect. If he's a bit contained, and perhaps Erik ten Hag has got a big job to do to establish what exactly his role will be in this team. Erik ten Hag spoke about before when he had just signed him how he's important with the transitions because with his speed and his ability to play a pass, maybe that would be good in the transitions. But where would he be playing? If you've got Bruno there, and that's the issue, is he's a bit blocked by Bruno, and it's difficult for Erik ten Hag to drop Bruno now, given his stats, but also the fact that he gave him the captain's armband. So it's difficult to drop him. And if you look at the players we have now, the only position that you think Mount can compete for is the Bruno position. You can't look at him playing ahead of Mason Mount, rather ahead of Kobe Maino. Mount cannot be playing ahead of Kobe Maino, unless again he's coming on as a substitute in the rotation. But for a player we signed and the way we signed him for 60 million, 60 million quid in the summer, he should be a starter. Where would he be starting? So Erik ten Hag has got to be creative and devise means of accommodating him. Now, if you ask me to as a trial, if you ask me, I would risk putting Marcus Rashford on the bench. I play Mount as a number 10, push Bruno wide to the right, and put Garnacho on the left. That's, I think, a trial. Because of all those players, the easiest one to bench is Marcus Rashford. For me, that would be the easiest. But of course, for Erik ten Hag, he's probably the most difficult to bench, not to start. So how do you then accommodate Mason Mount? Because Kobe is certainly there. Casemiro is playing number 6. So you have Kobe, he has got to be in that midfield. So where do you put Mason Mount? Are you putting out Bruno and play him as a number 10? It's difficult to bench Bruno, really. It's very difficult. Unless he fails to perform completely, it's all bad. At least they will figure Erik ten Hag would play him as a centre back. But it's so difficult for Erik ten Hag to bench Bruno. It's difficult to even justify. The thought of it alone is difficult. So that's a bit of the confusion. But unless, like Erik ten Hag said at one point, he needs to have competitive players in all positions. So you're looking at him as a proper backup for Bruno. And again, how many times do we see Bruno injured, or do we see him substituted again? You don't spend 60 million for a backup. So there is a big headache on Mason Mount, but it's good that he's back to fight and prove to us that he has got a place in that team. He seems to be hungry and motivated to return, and let's wait and see. Maybe he can have a minute or two against Liverpool, and that could be the launch of his return. For Aaron Wan-Bissaka, he should be the easier one to slot in. I think for Wan-Bissaka, if he's fully fit, and now that because their return has been gradual, they have been really scrutinized and prepared for this return. So by the time they come and start training with the team, they are probably good enough to make the squad. So Aaron Wan-Bissaka's return could be easier because the left back position is there, and it's glaring that he is a better left back than any of the guys, the Lindelofs, the Amrabats, any of the guys who are trying to fix in that position. So for Wan-Bissaka, I think it will be easier for him to integrate into the team and find his place in the team for as long as Tyrell Malaysia and Luke Shaw not there. So for Wan-Bissaka, I think it will be easier. But those are the two big boosts to the squad. But regardless, even if they may not be clear starters in the team yet, I think their return for me brings a lot of promise, brings a lot of energy in the squad because it also gives options to Eric Ten Hag and eases a bit of the pressure on him because I mean it's difficult to work with a thin squad, extremely difficult. But also for players like Diogo Dalot to get some rest because at some point they will need it. The games we are heading into are extremely high intensity games. You need rotation, especially in the Premier League. So with the FA Cup, you're thinking if this Wan-Bissaka and Mount are returning, maybe it's an option for Eric Ten Hag to try and rotate his players and try to keep players fresh for the bigger one, which is the top four in the Premier League, which requires us to win all remaining games. So for me, that's the advantage. I will not. That's the advantage we get from these players returning. So that's why we should say well done to the medical team because they don't really get a lot of things right, really, do they? Because players are returning and going, coming and going. So that's a very good, interesting update ahead of our home game against Liverpool. Let's see how Eric Ten Hag makes use of them. The other player we know should be available on Sunday is Rasmus Højlund, unless something else happens within the week when he returns to training. But chances are Højlund will be available for the Liverpool game. So is Harry Maguire. Luke Shaw, rather, Mount had been expected to return after the international break, but he has made it. He has surprised everyone because he has been working hard. He has been hungry to return. I think of all the players, I think he's the one who has been most hungry to return, like eager, because he knows a new, man at the helm of football. He has got to prove himself. We signed him, and he's yet to play football for Man United. If there's one player who needs to prove himself and earn his money, it's Mason Mount, and he knows it. So that's why his return is, as you see the smile on his face, it's beatific because he knows exactly what is expected of him. So this return boost again will barring injuries, will wait for Luke Shaw and Tyrell Malaysia and Lisandro Martinez, most importantly. But the other players who are returning are giving us a good boost as a squad going forward. Now, of course, as we do head to play Liverpool, of course, there is a lot of talk, speculation on regards players who will leave in the summer and who will stay. There's lots of talk of, but of course, even Eric Ten Hag, and this Gary Southgate talk is beginning to take center stage. I do want to shift attention away from it for a bit, but since I'm giving you all Man United news today, I'll just talk about it. It is said that Gary Southgate is the only issue that could fetter his joining Man United and replacing Eric Ten Hag is the timing because of the Euros and the stuff. But he's a front contender to replace Ten Hag should INEOS choose to pull the bullet on the manager. I'm beginning to get second thoughts about firing Eric Ten Hag, to be honest. If he can put together good performances, good displays, maybe he deserves a bit of time. But, well, whatever INEOS thinks is right is what they will do. So there's that about, but also other positions in terms of how much money we have to spend, in terms of transfers, in terms of the summer and how we are going to handle it. Manchester United seems to be clear. They want to sign players and many players to try and boost the squad. So the overhaul is expected to be sooner than we could have thought. They may not make it as gradual as we would have expected. INEOS seem not to have time. They're in a race against time to make things work as early as they can. And that's why they want to go aggressive, go all out in the market when we get to the summer. That's exactly what INEOS are contemplating doing. That's why they are handling the football very fast. They as well, that's we saw meetings with Deco and these Barcelona chiefs with our directors, John Mata and Matt Hargreaves. So you see that INEOS are moving, they're making moves. So even the players know they've got to make moves fast and impress so fast because there is no time for INEOS. They are also at the same time handling the whole stadium situation. So everything for INEOS is happening so fast. They seem to have no minute, no second to waste, which for me is a good thing because the Man United supporters have been hungry for performances for so long. So for me, it's very important. I love the pace at which INEOS is doing things, and I'm hoping they're sure about what they're doing. I trust that Jim and how he has managed his businesses. I think he's a guy who doesn't need eons of years or ages to make things happen. So let's wait and see how it goes. That is the United Hotspot quick update on what's happening concerning Manchester United. The key things are the two players who are returning, and let's see how Eric Ten Hag will plan for them when we do take on Liverpool in the quarterfinal of the FA Cup.